It's Maria's Mutts and Stuff
What a great idea!
on iHeart Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Maria's Mutts and Stuff. It's Maria Milito, and with me today is a family therapist and author of The Pet Loss Companion, Healing Advice from Family Therapists Who Lead Pet Loss Groups, Ken Dolan-Del. Ken, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you, Maria. It's great to be with you.
It's wonderful, and I have to, I don't mean it as full disclosure, but I have to explain something to you because something with pet loss always means a lot to me. Years and years ago, I had a pug, and her name was Clarice the Wonder Pug, and I spoke about her on the air for many, many years, from when she was a puppy till when she died in 2006. She was almost 16. And when she passed away, I received so many emails from listeners, and I wound up self-publishing a kind of a pet loss book, but it was, and not for profit. It was, with the proceeds, I would sell a book and then give the money to an animal shelter or a rescue. And it was like a compilation, and I made it into all different chapters about, what do I do with the body? How do I know when it's time? And it was basically my listeners who put together this book with me. So as a result, and now this is almost... I published it in 2011, so 7 years ago. Anytime somebody's pet passes away, I almost feel like I've become like a priest, because people come to me, and then I send them one of my books. I mean, it's a weird, and I shouldn't call it weird. But it is. It's kind of a weird job that I've taken on. So that's why I'm very excited to talk to you, because you're the real deal,
Well, I'm very touched to hear what you have to say, because it's so important for people to know that there are others who care.
Yes.
We live in a world where there are a lot of people who don't care. They think of animals as objects, and when a person loses a pet, they're flummoxed by what they see in their grief. They feel like, well, if you lose a pet, you should just go get another one.
Right, like it's a couch, like your worn out couch. Yeah, and it's not.
It's not. It's a living, breathing, dear, dear friend. Our pets often are sharing our lives in a very intimate fashion. They may be the first one who greets us every morning when we get up. They may be the one who is so excited when we come home and jumping all over us. They may be the one who we tell our secrets to, and we know they'll always keep them.
That's right.
and when they get older, often we have to care for them in ways that are extraordinarily intimate. We often have to give them medication. We may have to take them for various kinds of therapies. We have to intuit what they're feeling, if they're feeling pain or if they're feeling discomfort, and that builds a kind of connection. It's very much like the connection that a parent has with an infant, because they can't talk. Right. I was going to say that. And with a pet, it never changes. It's always that way.
Right. They can't communicate by the spoken word. So we have to learn like every movement of theirs, especially with a senior pet. It's absolutely. That's a perfect analogy, that it's like a parent with an infant.
Yeah.
It's really, yeah. Yeah, I don't understand. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to just say that I just about 5 weeks ago, adopted a barn cat.
Okay.
And a barn cat is a cat with a personality disorder. It's a cat who can't live in the house because maybe they get riled and they sometimes scratch or bite.
Okay.
And so the shelter neuters them and makes sure that they're well. And then they adopt them out to somebody who will have them on their property, give them shelter. Mine has all the pleasantries of a home. She has a heated box and a heated water bowl, and she's actually in a heated area when she wants to get some rest. But she doesn't bite. She doesn't scratch. As long as as long as I pay attention to the signs. If I'm petting a cat and she starts waving her tail or getting a little bit antsy, I know to back off.
Right.
And I think that's we have to be attuned, and we have to pay attention to our animals. And if we do, there's so much reward to be gained.
It's true. That could also be your next book, because I don't know if there are books about paying attention to the signs from cats. Because I know with dogs, it's all about, I want, my current dog is a fearful dog. So when I first adopted him, I bought all these books on signals and how to watch their body language. And I learned so much. But I wasn't aware if there was the same thing with cats. And you're telling me that there is. So that could be your next book.
I think it's there with, I think if we calm down and pay attention, we can find great ways to communicate and great ways to understand every other
any animal, of course. No, it's
Absolutely.
True. Yeah, that's very true. It's true. So what is the first thing, or for people who lose a pet, regardless, dog, cat, a bird, whatever their animal was that was part of their family, what's the first question, say, if somebody you're speaking to, like, what's their first, what's their most, what am I trying to get to? Like, what is the thing that bothers them the most? Is it that people don't understand? It's that they can't control their feelings? I mean, is there one thing that seems to be like the common thread, besides, of course, the sense of loss?
I think that it really is the sense of loss. I think it's just a very deep pain, and often it's unanticipated because they just didn't feel that it would hurt as much as it does. And one of the comments that the people often struggle with, one of the questions they bring is, how come this hurts more than when my parent died,
yes,
or when a dear friend died?
Yes.
And that's something that feels like it's almost an insult to the other relationships that they lost. And we'll just talk with them about how it has to do with the fact that we live so closely with our animals. Just the kind of stuff I was mentioning before. They are part of our household, and we touch them with our hands every day. There's something incredibly powerful about that. And it's also important to know that that we shouldn't rank our relationships according to how sad we are when we lose them. That's not a reasonable or a helpful thing to do. You feel what you feel. Right. And it's important to allow for that and to do the things that will help you get through it.
And do you think part of it's also because animals give us the unconditional love, where with a person you might argue with, or they might, criticize you, but an animal never, ever does.
They never do. It's a very uncomplicated emotional bond. There's no jealousy. There's no envy. There's no backstabbing.
Nothing.
There's nothing that makes it so that we are going to feel all of those complicated, challenging feelings that are often right at the center of our relationships with other human beings. Right.
So I guess with the animal, because it's so pure, is that, yeah. I mean, that I guess makes sense.
I also think that, and we hear this a lot, when a pet dies, it's the end of an era in our lives. It's often the case that people will say, this dog was with me when we went through this horrible time in our marriage and decided to separate and get divorced, and I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to take care of myself. And she was with me as I pulled myself together, always a support. And now I'm doing okay, and it's such a hard thing to look back and know that this animal was here for me all this time, and now they're gone. Right.
That makes perfect sense. It's true. Clarice, who I told you about at the beginning, she was with me when I was married. We went through a divorce with her, went through losing jobs, getting new jobs, relatives that she knew passing away, but she was the constant for 16 years. So yeah, it's true. I mean, it's not the same, but it's when people tell me, playing classic rock, that a certain song brings them back to a certain memory. I guess that particular pet brings us back to a happier time or whatever, but a portion of our lives that we lived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that people feel really encumbered with is guilt.
Yes.
It's the people, and what I've seen, Maria, is that it's the people who care and do and go way overboard that will often feel the most guilt. It kind of makes sense because those of us and the people who come to meetings on pet loss are mostly these people. Those of us who are so conscientious and so attentive always want to feel like we could have seen or we should have known. We should have paid more attention one way or another. And so the loss feels like I did something wrong,
right,
or I failed. And it's so important to keep reminding people we can see clearly more clearly, let's say, what was happening in hindsight.
Right.
But at the time, we did the best we could. That's all we can do. And that's the full measure of love. You do what you can to be supportive and to pay attention. And we're not all knowing. We're not all seeing. And so there's a lot of looking at and talking about and getting through to a place of forgiveness of self.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Because we're supposed to be so smart, but we also are, I think, sometimes our own worst enemies.
Yeah.
And guilt is just a horrible emotion. Guilt is just awful.
It's so hard. And all of our emotions fill purposes. It's good to feel guilty sometimes because it helps us to do things better and to take stock of our errors. But if it's not really reasonable, then we need to really talk ourselves through that. I can tell you that we had a Chihuahua. His name is Jack, and we had 4 Chihuahuas at the time.
Oh,
we
wow.
had 2, and he was in congestive heart failure for 2 years, year and a half, I guess. And we were going on vacation. So my husband and I were going to be overseas with friends, and took him to the vet and asked if he was stable. He seemed pretty stable. And the vet said, "Oh, absolutely. He's on his medication regimen. He's doing as well as he's been doing for several months. It's not the kind of thing where we're going to expect him to expire in the next little bit." Well, we went on vacation for about a week and a couple of days, and he died during this time when he was in the care of the pet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pet sitter.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks. And he was just coming up to 16 years old.
Wow.
So about the same age as Clarice.
Right.
When he died. And I got to tell you, that was so painful.
Of course.
But at the same time, and I revisit that all the time, at the same time I have to say to myself, we got consultation. He had good care. He had a really great medication regimen. And everything we knew told us that this was not going to happen.
Right. You did all the right stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So we got to forgive ourselves when that
it's true
kind of thing happens.
We can't foresee the future. It would be a wonderful world if we could, but maybe not. You can't.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. So do you think sometimes the guilt also comes from the people who are around us, say, besides people who aren't pet owners, but maybe if you have a boss that doesn't understand or your coworkers don't understand, that adds to people's guilt, yes?
Well, I think it adds to people's guilt in a different and a different painful way. That is that then when that's going on, then people will often feel, what's wrong with me? Why am I so upset about this?
Right.
And that happens a lot, and it's very important for people to honor their grief and to realize that there is nothing abnormal about this. I have to tell you, I read research many years ago that really stays with me, and it said that the results were essentially that when in our society, in our mainstream culture, when a person suffers a major loss, a family member, a very significant love relationship, any kind of significant loss, the people around them will generally accept and expect them to be grieving for 3 weeks.
That's it?
That's it. And then after the 3 weeks, there will be the expectation that there's probably something wrong with this person if they're still sad. And that is just...
Oh, that's awful.
It's not the way it works.
No, everybody's different. But 3 weeks is nothing.
Different. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing.
Oh, my God.
But that's what we're up against.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it takes whatever time it takes. And it's also very individualized.
That's
People
true, yeah.
will go, go through what's normal for them given the particulars of the loss. And, it has to do with things like your spirituality. It has to do with what the other stressors are in your environment at the time that you have this loss. It has a lot to do with the kinds of support that you have. It has to do with your gender.
Right.
Women tend to be able to express what's going on inside in a more direct and more specific kind of way. We men tend to be more close. I mean, it's a broad stroke.
No, it is, but it's true. Females are more emotional. Yes. Yeah.
It does apply. And it even has to do with your ethnicity. So I'm Italian in background, and there are stereotypes, but stereotypes often hold some degree of truth. And so you may come from a background in a family that's quite expressive, that talks openly and says what they're feeling. And if you are coming from, let's say, an English background or a Swedish background, it might be a little less your style.
Right. You keep things more close. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
true.
All of these things shape what your experience is going to be, and it's all okay. It's all normal.
That's good. No, but that's good. That's a big checklist for everyone, for us to hear from you, the expert, that it's normal, because it is normal.
Absolutely normal. And sometimes people will feel like they're losing their minds.
Yes. Yeah.
Grief really wreaks havoc with our ability to keep our emotions level. So you might be really sad at one moment, you might be furious the next, you might then feel quite calm for a little while, and then you're just racked with sadness. And it's not linear. It's a tumult of different feelings that over time you'll feel more settled, and you will have incorporated the knowledge of the loss into your life history in a way that is more settled. But it can be a real mess. And also, when we're grieving, our short-term memory can be distorted. Our ability to concentrate can be shot.
Sure.
Our sleep may be messed up in one way or another. So we just have to give ourselves license to feel what we feel and not judge ourselves harshly.
Yeah, like just cut yourself some slack.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, so I guess then basically, guilt kind of messes with our chemical balance. I mean, it kind of makes us chemically imbalanced, I would think, for all of that to happen.
All of this does. And sometimes people will say, do I need help? Do I need to see a therapist? And one of the markers that we always pay attention to is the boundary between normal grief and what begins to look like clinical depression. And it's a little tricky, but what you can determine is that if a person is able to keep doing the basics, if we're able to get up in the morning and do our shower, get ourselves together, get ourselves dressed, if we're going to work or to some other activity every day to get ourselves there, if we're able to make sure that we eat well, all of those kinds of things, if we're able to do that, it's probably normal grief. It's probably within the limits that we would consider you're going through a difficult grief process.
Right.
If you are not able to do those things, and you are feeling so down that you never feel even the possibility of cracking a smile during a period that goes on for 2 weeks or more, then you can begin to think, okay, it wouldn't hurt, and you probably deserve to talk with a therapist.
Right.
But if you're doing more of what I said before, if you're functioning, then you're probably going to be fine just with the support that's around you, the support that you generate from those who really are there with you and love and respect you and will pay attention to your vulnerability in a way that's caring and not dismissive.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's fair to say that people should surround themselves with those that aren't dismissive. And for me, the past few years, anytime I've had a dog that passed away, and it also, and not that I had to weed out friends, but probably from the first dog, I learned who my true friends are, because the ones who were dismissive, or I'm not really friends with them anymore. Does that make sense? Right? Because
it makes sense. It makes sense. One of the things that I try to keep in mind with people is most people are well-intended. Most people want to be helpful,
right.
But there's a couple things that are going against them. And one of them is that in our culture, it is very difficult for many people to be in the presence of another person who's experiencing emotional pain.
Yes.
We are so unpracticed at it. And when you're empathically connected to another person who's feeling pain, you are likely to feel some pain yourself. And for some people, that is simply intolerable. It's an unfortunate reality, but it's very common. And so they'll say things like they're in a better place,
right.
or you did the best you can, and they were suffering so much that it's probably a good thing that they passed. All kinds of things. Even when they say things like, maybe you should just get another one, that may be that they're trying to help you feel better. What they really are doing is trying to help themselves feel better, because if you would get back to where you were before the loss, then they wouldn't have to feel the pain that they're feeling in your presence.
I see. And people do this with people too, not just with pet
absolutely.
Loss, right? Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. Very.
Yes.
Loss is loss. And there used to be a time where we just lived closer to nature, most of us. And we understood that death is the ending, as far as we know, of the life cycle.
Right.
And it was much more typical, and we experienced it, and so it wasn't so foreign. I have to tell you, and I think this is not a good thing for us to make death such a foreign reality. I have to tell you, I was startled one day. I was on AOL. I was about to check my email, and there was a screaming headline. And the headline said, and I won't name the celebrity, but it named the celebrity, and it said, "Faces catastrophe."
Oh, boy.
And then the subheading was, "Her 95-year-old mother just passed away." And I looked at that, and I said, that is not a catastrophe.
Right. That was a wonderfully long life.
Yeah, that is not a catastrophe.
Oh,
and that's one of the things that we see in grief support, is that people will experience the death of their animal friend as a catastrophe, as certainly somebody did something wrong.
Right.
As something that never should have happened. And that I must say, Maria, surprises me over and over. It always surprised me, because when we get an animal companion, unless they're a parrot or a turtle, or maybe we adopt a horse and we're in our later age ourselves,
right,
they're gonna predecease us.
Right, that's true.
And we just have to know that.
Right.
But I'll tell you a story, if I may.
Of course. Please.
about a situation. So there was a woman who came to the group, and she told this story probably 3 times. She had a dog, and the dog had cancer in its snout, and it was at the very end stage, and the dog was in pain, and her veterinarian was telling her, you really deserve to end the suffering by letting the dog go.
Right.
But she just couldn't do it. And she and her husband were driving, and they had their dog in the back seat. And she glanced in the back seat, and her friend had died. And she went into just a full-blown panic. She shouted at her husband to pull off the road. He did. She jumped in the back seat. And she's telling this story. She said, I jumped in the back seat. I grabbed the dog's snout, and I started giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And there was blood, and there was other fluids, and I just kept going, and I was distraught. And I remember, and I may have done this more than once. I believe that I did. I got really close to her, and I tried to fix my eyes on her, and I said, your dog needed to die.
Exactly.
He needed to die. And that's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. We are all going to die one day. It is part of life.
Right. Right.
And it's sad, and it's difficult, but it's just part of the way things are. And I feel like that's something we deserve to know and to hang on to. And honestly, when it comes to people, I feel like it's important for us to know that, because it helps us to make the most of our lives. If we know that our lives are not infinite, then we cherish the time we have. We are going to make plans with the people we love. Those plans are hopefully going to serve the desires of our heart, and we're going to craft a life that is powerfully meaningful to us.
Sure.
I think that's very important.
No, it absolutely is. Well, they always say live each day to the fullest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, it's the John Lennon, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
You just never know, you know.
You never know. There's a great book by a guy named Dwayne Elgin called Voluntary Simplicity.
Okay.
And he has a section in there, and I always remember the title of that section. The title is Let Death Be Your Friend. And his meaning is exactly what we were just talking about. The meaning is don't behave as though your life will go on forever. Behave as though your life is an extraordinary gift, and you want to be aware of that gift and make the most of it all the time.
That's true. That's perfect. It's perfect. And we should do the same with our pets.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We should care for them. We should love them.
Play with them, do things, walk them. Yes.
Yeah. And know that we gave them a great life, and that we can now go forward wiser. I really think that grief brings wisdom, because when we go through the process of grief, we take in a new story, and that story helps us to understand the complexities of life and to gain new strength to face the challenges that come ahead, because every challenge makes us stronger. It makes us wiser. And there used to be this sense, or some people will say, that we go through grief and then we come to a place of acceptance. It's actually the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model, where we start with the loss, and then we feel a whole bunch of things like numb and shock and disbelief, and then we go into despair, and then we go into anger, and then we go into bargaining, and bargaining is about trying to make things the way they were as though the loss hadn't happened. Eventually we come to acceptance. Yes. I think the model, and she was a brilliant woman, and this is an extraordinarily helpful tool. But I like to say also that we don't come to a place of acceptance so much as we come to a new understanding. We live beyond the loss, and we're changed by it in a way that strengthens us. That's the way we don't come back to exactly where we were.
Right.
We come back to a place that once we get there, and once we're not so wrought by the feelings, is actually a stronger place, a better place.
I was just going to say that it's a new place, but I think it's a better place. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and because you're stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
And grief to me, and I often think about this, and it was told to me, and I opened the book with this story. When I was a young therapist, I went to a training on loss and grief, and the speaker said, "We need to understand that grief is the cost of having loved." And that we want love in our lives, so we always want it. We always want to go into it. We always want to go into loving relationships because that's one of the richest experiences we can have, and we don't want to be afraid of grief. Right,
that's true, and that's the same with a person and with an animal.
Absolutely. I
mean, because I have friends who, after their dog passed away, years later, they said, I can't do it. My brother won't get another dog after his dog passed away a few years ago because they were in such pain when their dog died, and he won't get another dog. And, but I guess everybody's different, because then you have the others who will get a dog and the next day they'll go to the shelter and get another dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And again, it's like, whatever works for you.
Whatever works.
I've seen those. Absolutely. I've seen people who do what you said. They're like, I can't ever face this again.
Mm-hmm.
And they protect themselves from the loss. And then there are other people who go and get a dog or a cat or whatever animal they want to be close to, and it works perfectly fine. The one thing that you have to watch out for is presuming that if you get another pet, it will leap you to the end of the grief process. It will somehow make it so you don't have to grieve. That's a recipe for pain for everybody involved.
Right.
Because what will happen if you think that this animal is a replacement, it will soon become evident that they are themselves.
Right. It's a different animal. Yes.
They are their own. They are their own unique selves, and now you've got to care for a new animal friend when you're also going through a very challenging time. So it can never hurt to wait a little bit, but some people, absolutely, it's going to work well for them to get a pet. I tend to stagger mine.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bunch of animal companions.
Right.
All the time.
No, that's good. That's good, but I guess it's an individual thing, and it's like we're not making any judgments. We're just saying it's different for everyone.
Exactly. It's whatever works for you.
Yeah. Well, what I love about your book is, when Clarice, my first dog, when she first passed away, I actually did go to a pet loss group, and that helped me. I went to a few sessions of it. But what I love is that, this podcast, too, is national, and not everybody has access where they live to go to a pet loss group, because not every town or city has that. So I love that your book takes the place of that.
That's exactly the intention behind the book, was to take the experiences and the recommendations and the almost like the experience of being in the group, and offer it to people who don't have a group that's close.
Right.
And the last chapter is it's a compilation. It's a depiction of the way a group goes.
Right.
And so what it's like to be in such a meeting.
Well, I highly recommend it. And unfortunately, and I know I shouldn't say, I take that back, because after talking to you, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it's something that anyone who has a pet knows that at some point we will lose the pet. And I say unfortunately, but you're teaching me that I shouldn't, because it's the cycle of life and to accept it. But your book, The Pet Loss Companion, I think is a very useful tool, because it's something that every pet owner does go through. And I'm not saying unfortunately.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Thanks for the compliment. And yeah, we have to we want to cherish
Absolutely.
the people and the animals and the life we have. And I think that makes it all richer. And then when the end comes for our animal friend, we do what's necessary to keep ourselves well. We remember them. We take them into our hearts and into our memory, and we go on with our lives. And in many cases, we go on as a testament to our relationship with them to adopt another animal into our lives.
Right. Because that to me is always, I think I'm trying to remember who said this. It was a famous author. And basically the upshot is if you don't get another dog or cat after your pet passes away, then the pet you had before didn't do its job. And I'm totally not giving it the exact words that it was, but I just love that because it's true. It's like, well, what do you mean? I was a great pet. Why didn't you get another one?
Well, there are those people, and we write about this in one of the chapters. There are those people who feel that would be a betrayal, and not uncommon at all. And in fact, there are people who feel that even experiencing joy is a betrayal.
Oh.
And one of the things that they learn when they have a conversation is your pet loved you.
Right.
They would never want you to feel that way. They would want you, anybody who loves you would want you to be joyful. They wouldn't want you to be morose. They wouldn't want you to be depressed. They would want you to go on and live your best life. And that's a hard place for some people to go for a bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes round to that because the time has a special magic in terms of helping us heal, but we deserve to get support and to pay attention to what we can gain in any case.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Well, I want my listeners to visit you at greengateleadership.com. Yes?
Great.
And
yes,
that's Ken Dolan-Del, and they can get the book through that website as well? And your other books?
Well, they can be linked to Amazon. The book is most readily available
on Amazon.
You can get it as a hard copy or as a Kindle copy. And on my website, you'll see my other books. My current book is called Simple Habits of Exceptional, and then in parentheses, but not perfect parents.
Uh-huh.
and that's also drawn from years of clinical experience and years of lived experience and conversations with many friends and family members.
Excellent. Well, Ken Dolan-Del, greengateleadership.com. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge, and for all the pet owners and lovers. It's just so precious. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you so much, Maria. It's been a privilege talking with you.